Welcome to Black Thread Mysteries, where every unsolved mystery, vanishing act, and forbidden tale is just the beginning. Dive into the shadows with us as we pull the thread on the stories the world forgot or tried to hide. Subscribe and step into the unknown. It begins like every haunting legend does, with someone simply going for a walk in the woods, never to return. The vast stretches of American national parks seem like untouched paradises, but behind their beauty lies an unsettling truth. Hundreds of hikers vanish in these pristine wildernesses each year, often without a single clue left behind. No torn clothing, no broken branches, no signs of struggle, just silence. These aren't just routine missing persons cases. They're vanishings that defy logic. Search dogs losing scent within feet, footprints ending mid-trail, and GPS devices that stop transmitting with no warning. Some cases go cold within days. Others stir whispers of something darker at play. From secret government sites to portals and unexplained natural phenomena. Let's start with the baffling case of Dennis Martin, a 6-year-old boy who vanished in 1969 while on a family trip to the Great Smoky Mountains National Park. Within seconds of playing hide-and-seek with his siblings, Dennis was gone. Despite an immediate and massive search effort involving the FBI, Green Berets, and local volunteers, no trace of him was ever found. What makes this even stranger is the timeline. A separate hiker reported hearing a scream and seeing a rough-looking man carrying something over his shoulder not far from where Dennis disappeared. Officials brushed it off. But why were elite military units called in for a missing child? And why did they operate independently, refusing to share findings? Then there's Thelma Pauline Melton, who disappeared in 1981 on the same trail she'd hiked countless times before. She walked ahead of her friends and vanished just beyond a gentle bend. No injuries, no known mental health issues, no history of wandering. Just an ordinary woman who seemingly melted into the landscape. Her case still baffles local rangers. No scent trails were picked up, and no items were recovered. How can someone just dissolve from a well-maintained, well-traveled path? Some researchers and online communities began connecting dots between these disappearances, identifying clusters where multiple vanishings occurred over time. The term Missing 411 emerged, a reference to the growing number of unexplained cases compiled by former police detective David Paulides. His investigations uncovered patterns that mainstream authorities often ignored. People vanishing near boulder fields, just before storms, near areas of granite, or close to water sources. Coincidence? Or a pattern that hints at a more sinister, intelligent force at play? These cases raise questions many refuse to ask. Are we dealing with predators, human or otherwise? Or are we brushing against the boundaries of natural and unnatural? For the families left behind, the answers never come. Only theories whispered on Reddit forums and late-night paranormal podcasts. And perhaps most chilling of all, for every case that makes headlines, dozens more remain buried in forgotten police logs and local ranger notes. Stories of individuals who went hiking in daylight, with others nearby, on marked trails, and never came home. It's not just about being lost. It's about being erased. Systematically, quietly, without explanation. The wilderness is supposed to leave signs. Footprints, bent grass, broken branches. But time and again, in the cases of missing hikers, nature offers only silence. One particularly disturbing case occurred in Yosemite National Park, involving a 14-year-old named Stacy Ann Aris. In 1981, she was on a horseback camping trip with her father and a small group. After arriving at a high-altitude camp area, she told others she wanted to stretch her legs and take a short walk to a nearby ridge with her camera. A fellow guest watched her wander off toward a cluster of trees. Moments later, she was gone. Searchers found the lens of her camera, but not her body. Helicopters, dogs, and hundreds of searchers combed the terrain. No scent, no scream, no sign of distress. Just one moment there, the next vanished. The official park records of her disappearance have since been heavily redacted. Why would a missing person file for a teenager be sealed or censored? What could be so sensitive that it needs to be hidden decades later? Then there's the story of Jared Negrete, a 12-year-old Boy Scout who disappeared in the San Bernardino National Forest in 1991. He was last seen by his troop leader during a hike to Mount San Gorgonio. Days later, searchers found his camera, which contained eerie photos, mostly of the ground and blurry landscapes. But the last image was a close-up of Jared's face, taken with the flash in the dark. No body, no gear, just that camera, left behind like a message no one could fully decode. Why do so many of these cases involve cameras and electronics left behind? In some incidents, cell phones stop functioning even when the batteries are fully charged. Radios go silent. GPS data vanishes. In modern cases, park rangers and law enforcement often dismiss these as technical glitches. But when these glitches happen repeatedly in similar geographic zones, it begins to look less like error and more like design. Reports from seasoned hikers and campers describe sudden feelings of confusion, disorientation, and even the sensation of being watched right before they lose their way. In several recovered cases, hikers report losing time, memory blackouts, and even hearing voices that weren't there. Are these signs of panic and exhaustion, or is there an environmental trigger, something electromagnetic or even psychological, that disorients people deliberately? Others speculate something more sentient. Indigenous legends tied to these lands often mention spirit beings or watchers who dwell in deep forest zones. From the Wendigo of the northern woods to the skinwalkers of the southwest, tales of human-like creatures stealing travelers away are eerily aligned with the locations of these disappearances. Skeptics argue the woods are simply unforgiving. A single misstep can send someone off trail, and hypothermia or injury takes over. But this doesn't explain how dogs can't track, how personal belongings are later found in areas already searched, or why the missing so often vanish right behind someone else's back, within earshot, within sight. These stories aren't just isolated misfortunes, they're patterns. Patterns the authorities rarely acknowledge and the public barely understands. But we're only just beginning to descend into the deeper layers of this mystery. Not every forest is created equal. Some seem to consume people faster than others. As investigators began piecing together missing hiker cases from national parks, something unsettling emerged. A pattern that defied randomness. Certain parks appear to host a disproportionate number of unsolved vanishings. The Rocky Mountain National Park, Yosemite, Crater Lake, and the Great Smoky Mountains, places celebrated for their breathtaking landscapes, are also grounds for stories that end without resolution. Take Kenny Veach, an experienced outdoorsman who vanished near Nellis Air Force Base in the Mojave Desert in 2014. Known online as Snake Bitten G, he had discovered a strange cave during a solo hike, one that reportedly made his body vibrate as he approached it. He never shared its coordinates, but after uploading a video describing the location, he went back to find it again. He never returned. His phone was found near an abandoned mine shaft, but no body, no gear, no footprints in the surrounding dust. How does a seasoned hiker simply disappear near a cave he believed had physical effects on the human body? And then there's Tom Messick, a 82-year-old retired military man who vanished in the Adirondack Mountains in 2015. He was hunting with friends, armed, experienced, and less than a mile from his group. They never heard a gunshot, a cry for help, just silence. The oddest part? The FBI got involved, which is highly unusual for a hunting disappearance. What was so unusual about his case that it required federal oversight? In many cases, bodies are later discovered in areas that were previously searched thoroughly, sometimes multiple times. Clothing is often found folded neatly, boots placed side by side, or items stacked in ways that suggest intentional arrangement. Search and rescue veterans find this disturbing. Nature doesn't fold pants or remove shoes carefully. So who, Or what is doing it? Let's not overlook how many victims vanish right before storms hit. This weather connection repeats so often it's hard to ignore. Is it coincidence? Or does the change in atmospheric pressure and visibility serve as a perfect cover for abductions, natural or otherwise? And then there's the geological oddities. Several missing persons zones are marked by clusters of granite formations, boulder fields, or magnetic anomalies. Granite is known to hold slight radioactive properties and sometimes creates interference with electronics. Could these areas be emitting something unknown, something capable of disorienting human perception, scrambling technology, or even opening something else? Even more unsettling are reports of recovered individuals who, when found alive, recall hearing whispers in the woods or being watched by something tall, something wrong. Some speak of lost time, missing hours or even days with no memory of how they got from one location to another. Others recall a feeling of being drawn somewhere, as if something was calling to them. These aren't just odd details. They form a mosaic, one made from fear, grief, and the unknown. From high-elevation vanishings to sudden sensory anomalies and bodies reappearing in impossible locations. These details weave a tapestry of something we're not meant to understand. Or worse, something we've ignored too long. And yet, despite all this, national parks offer no public database of the missing, no centralized system. Each case is treated in isolation. Why? If the patterns are this obvious to civilians, how much more do those in power know and choose to withhold? When hundreds vanish in places owned and managed by the federal government, you'd expect a system in place, a centralized record, open statistics, frequent updates. But here's the chilling truth. There is no official, comprehensive database for people who go missing in America's national parks. Requests for records are often denied, delayed, or returned with missing details. Victim names omitted, search logs incomplete, statements redacted. Why is it so hard to get answers when the land is public, the victims are citizens, and the stakes are so high? David Paulides, a former law enforcement officer who created the Missing 411 project, began requesting data directly from the National Park Service. The response? He was told that the system didn't exist, and to build such a list, he'd have to pay an absurd sum, in the tens of thousands. If it doesn't exist, why assign a price? Paulides claims he wasn't just blocked, he was warned to stop pushing. That kind of resistance raises eyebrows. What is being protected? Who benefits from keeping these numbers in the dark? There's also a troubling inconsistency in how disappearances are handled. While some cases receive full-scale, multi-day search efforts involving helicopters, canine units, and interagency coordination, others barely receive media coverage. In some instances, families report being stonewalled by authorities, given vague updates or no information at all. In others, rangers seem oddly eager to suggest theories before even completing a search. The favorite explanation? They wandered off. Every time. Even when the footprints don't match. Even when the belongings are found miles away. Uphill. In snow. Barefoot. This inconsistency creates fertile ground for speculation. Conspiracy theories range from secret experiments conducted in remote forest labs to cover-ups of wildlife attacks that would damage tourism. Others go even deeper, suggesting hidden entrances to underground facilities, UFO sightings, or interdimensional rifts. These might sound like science fiction, but they often stem from the inexplicable nature of the evidence, or lack thereof. And there's precedent for secrecy. National parks contain sites with military significance, like Mount Weather or the now decommissioned Nike missile bases. Could there be places within these parks, concealed behind their natural beauty, that are off limits for reasons not even rangers understand? Even within the search teams themselves, strange stories emerge. Rescuers talk of being told not to speak to media. Some say they've come across odd structures deep in the woods, Stone circles, stairs leading to nowhere, shelters that look freshly abandoned but never used. These reports are often dismissed as folklore, but they align too often, across too many states, to ignore completely. Moreover, some areas are routinely closed to the public with little explanation. The term no-go zone isn't official, but insiders use it. Regions where people have disappeared too frequently, where wildlife behaves strangely, or where rangers simply say it's too dangerous. These places are rarely mapped or mentioned, but whispered about in ranger stations late at night. Perhaps most disturbing of all is that many of these vanishings don't occur in deep backcountry. They happen close to trails, campsites, and populated areas. A child walking a few feet ahead. A woman lagging behind for just a moment. A man stepping off trail to relieve himself. Never seen again. It's not the remoteness that terrifies. It's the immediacy. The way a person can be there 1 second, gone the next. And through it all, the silence continues. From park officials, from federal agencies, from the headlines that stop covering the case after a week. But the families never stop asking. And neither should we. Not every story ends in permanent disappearance. Sometimes the forest returns what it takes, but rarely in a condition that makes sense. When remains or survivors are recovered, the details often deepen the mystery instead of solving it. Patterns emerge that feel scripted by something not fully understood. One of the most baffling aspects of these recoveries is location inconsistency. Bodies are found in areas already searched, multiple times, sometimes with aerial support, dogs, and trained searchers. Take the case of Chris Geiger, who disappeared in New Mexico. After 10 days of fruitless searching, his body was discovered in a location that had been scoured early on. No one had seen or heard a thing. Officials chalked it up to a missed spot, but search and rescue teams privately expressed disbelief. Then, there's Mitchell Dale Waite, who vanished in the Sierra National Forest. After a prolonged search, his remains were discovered months later, on a ridge 2,000 feet higher than where he was last seen, in terrain described as nearly impassable. There were no clear trails, no climbing gear, and no sign of how he got there. His boots were off, placed neatly side by side, a detail that's become disturbingly common across dozens of similar cases. In case after case, clothing is found folded. Shoes are removed. Victims are found in positions that suggest deliberate placement. In some cases, bodies are discovered without trauma. No wounds, no clear cause of death, even in freezing weather without proper gear. Autopsies offer little closure, citing exposure or unknown causes. How do people climb thousands of feet without shoes, across harsh terrain, and simply lie down? And then there are those who return alive, though their stories are often more disturbing than comforting. Many are children who wandered away briefly, only to be found days later, unharmed, in odd condition, and unable to explain where they were. One child was found 15 miles from where he vanished, across mountain ranges and rivers, with no injuries or signs of fatigue. He said he was with a man who looked like Grandpa, who led him through the woods. Other survivors report time distortion. One hiker described walking for what felt like minutes before finding himself miles away from the trailhead. Another claimed to see a light in the forest and followed it, waking up alone near a road the next morning. They don't remember how they got there. There are also recurring reports of strange sounds, not animal calls, but low-frequency hums, metallic echoes, or voices just beyond earshot. These aren't rare. Multiple victims who've been found recall these same sonic phenomena, as if something was trying to communicate or lure. Medical evaluations of those recovered show oddities too. In some cases, there's no sign of dehydration or malnutrition, despite the amount of time missing. Other times, bodies show rapid decomposition that doesn't match the environmental exposure. Or worse, signs of preservation, as if time passed differently for them. Even trained professionals struggle to rationalize these cases. Park rangers often go silent, citing liability, protocol, or just plain confusion. Search dogs behave erratically, picking up a trail, then refusing to proceed past a certain point, or circling the same area for hours as if trapped in a loop. The deeper you look, the more apparent it becomes. Something is happening out there that our current tools and logic can't fully explain. Some recoveries bring answers. Most bring only more questions. And that brings us to the halfway mark, where things get stranger still. Before we dive even deeper into the shadows cast by our national parks, take a moment to reflect on this. What if your favorite hiking trail, the one you've walked dozens of times, holds secrets you've never noticed? Look closely at the trees. Listen to the silence. These stories aren't just myths. They're tied to real names, real places, and real vanishings. Have you or someone you know ever experienced something strange in a national park? A sudden feeling of dread, losing time, a sound you couldn't explain? Tell us in the comments. Your stories may be more important than you think. Sometimes, the smallest detail can unlock the biggest mystery. Now back to the forest. Some of the most inexplicable cases involve people vanishing while being watched. That's right in front of others. One chilling case is that of Jeanette Kasparek, who went missing in Mount Rainier National Park while hiking with her husband. He turned his head for seconds while she took a photo. Then she was gone. The terrain was open, no cliffs, no thick brush. 1 second she was visible. The next she had vanished without sound. Or take Jared Atadero, a 3-year-old boy who disappeared on a Colorado trail in 1999. He was with adults, only a few steps ahead. Minutes later, he was gone. His remains were found years later, shoes in pristine condition, despite years of exposure. His clothing appeared as if untouched by animals or weather. How is that possible? There are also reports from rescuers and rangers who've spoken off record about witnessing impossible things. Shapes moving too quickly between trees, figures watching them from ridgelines, disappearing when approached, sounds mimicking voices, calling out names of search team members. These accounts aren't from conspiracy theorists, but seasoned professionals trained to observe and report. Some suggest these vanishings are tied to geographic hotspots, places where the land itself seems to hum with unnatural energy. Witnesses report physical symptoms, nausea, migraines, or mental fog when entering certain areas. Devices malfunction, batteries drain, compasses spin. These anomalies aren't isolated. They occur again and again, in the same regions, over decades. Others point to ancient folklore as possible clues. Native American tribes often warned of sacred areas, places where the veil between worlds thins. Some even refused to enter certain parts of the land after dark, believing spirits or other beings moved there. Could these warnings be more than superstition, a survival tactic passed down over generations? One Navajo ranger reportedly told a search party, "You won't find them. The mountain took them. You don't search where the mountain has spoken." What does that mean? Is it symbolic, or something more literal, more alarming? Even if you reject supernatural explanations, there's still something undeniably wrong. The sheer number of disappearances, the precise and recurring circumstances, and the utter absence of consistent explanations suggest a deeper phenomenon, be it geological, biological, psychological, or otherworldly. Now consider this. In some cases, when the families go back to the sites on their own, they report seeing strange lights in the distance. Pale blue orbs dancing silently across the trees. Unresponsive to sound, these lights vanish the moment someone tries to approach. No drones, no aircraft, just light, in the middle of nowhere. Something is happening out there, and it's not random. For some who return from the edge of vanishing, the nightmare doesn't end with rescue. It lingers in the mind, festers in dreams, and stains their perception of what's real. Survivors, though rare, often speak of something few want to acknowledge: the sense of being watched, not by animals or humans, but by something older, wiser, unfathomably present, and almost always just out of view. Take the story of Timothy Barnes, an experienced hiker who got lost in the Olympic National Forest. He was found 2 days later, exhausted and dehydrated, but physically unharmed. But it was what he told rangers that left them stunned. He claimed he had followed a trail, clearly marked, until he felt an overwhelming urge to turn. Every rational thought told him to stay on course, but something pulled him off trail. He said it felt like being led, not by sound, but by instinct, like a rope pulling his gut. He spoke of hearing voices calling his name in the voice of his late mother, of seeing a dark figure watching from between trees, never moving, yet always in the corner of his eye. "The forest wanted me to go deeper," he told an interviewer later, "and I was about to let it." These accounts echo across cases. Missing individuals later found or barely recovered describe moments of extreme disorientation and hallucination-like experiences, visions of loved ones, strange animals, whispers, and shadowy forms that vanish when confronted. Even those who come close to getting lost report hearing footsteps behind them, only to turn and find nothing. And it's not just victims. Search and rescue personnel have their own share of unsettling stories. Some refuse to speak on the record, fearing ridicule or job loss. One retired ranger told of being deep in the woods when he heard a woman crying. When he approached, the cries stopped. He searched the area. Nothing. No prints, no animals, no signs that anyone had ever been there. "The air felt wrong," he said. "Too still, like I had stepped out of time." Another spoke of hearing his own voice calling his name from beyond a ridge. He never went to investigate. He said he knew, somehow, it wasn't him. What could explain such experiences? Psychologists suggest isolation and fear can produce auditory hallucinations. That might make sense for a lost hiker. But for teams working in groups, for trained professionals with years of experience in wilderness navigation. Then there are the cases of recovered GPS data, devices that record paths looping in impossible shapes, people walking for miles only to end up near where they started. In other instances, individuals go missing for days and insist they only walked for hours. Their internal clocks don't match the time they were gone. Could there be something naturally occurring in these forests? An environmental factor affecting human perception? Magnetic anomalies? Infrasound? Some scientists believe certain frequencies can trigger anxiety, hallucinations, or a sense of being watched. But again, why in the same places with such consistency across years? Skeptics argue for psychological breakdowns, misadventure, and chance. But how many times can you call something an exception before it becomes the rule? The deeper you travel into these cases, the more it begins to feel like the forest is not just a backdrop, but an active participant. One that selects, watches, and sometimes takes. In many of the areas where hikers vanish, a common thread runs beneath the soil: ancient history, often long buried or deliberately ignored. National parks are not just wilderness. They're also repositories of forgotten civilizations, sacred sites, and indigenous warnings older than the United States itself. Consider Crater Lake National Park in Oregon, one of the deepest lakes on Earth. Indigenous Klamath legends say the lake was formed by a great battle between gods, Skell of the sky and Lao of the underworld. The stories describe beings vanishing into its waters, never seen again. Today, hikers disappear around the lake with alarming frequency. Rangers report odd behaviors in those who've camped near its rim: disorientation, unease, even claims of seeing shapes beneath the water. In Yosemite, Mysterious disappearances align closely with ancient Miwok tribal lands. Local lore speaks of places where spirits roam, areas not to be entered after dusk. Though these accounts are brushed off as folklore, it's remarkable how often they correspond to modern missing person zones. The Miwok believed the forest had living doors, thresholds where one could wander into the spirit realm by mistake. Sound familiar? Take the Great Smoky Mountains, home to numerous strange vanishings, including the infamous case of Dennis Martin. This region, too, has ties to Cherokee beliefs about Nunahi, spirit people who live underground or just beyond the veil, who sometimes interact with or take humans. The tribes warned not to follow voices in the trees or lights in the distance. And yet, these are precisely the signs often described by those who vanish or survive. Even the Appalachian Trail, stretching over 2,000 miles, is a corridor of high strangeness. Along its path are stone structures of unclear origin, buried stone circles and odd mounds long dismissed as natural. But archaeologists have started to reconsider. What if these were ceremonial markers, boundaries, or something more powerful, wards keeping something in? There are repeating anomalies at these sites: electromagnetic interference, clusters of compass failures, strange temperature shifts, even gravitational oddities documented by amateur researchers. Most of these are ignored by official channels, but quietly acknowledged by those who patrol the land. "There are spots you don't go," one retired ranger said. "Places the forest doesn't want you in." Some believe these disappearances are tied to ley lines, theoretical energy paths connecting ancient monuments and spiritual sites across the globe. The theory suggests these lines amplify natural forces or open portals under certain conditions. While fringe in academia, it continues to gain traction in online communities analyzing the GPS coordinates of missing hiker clusters. A surprising number fall close to these supposed ley intersections. Then there are staircases. Yes, literal staircases found deep in the woods. Isolated, sometimes pristine, rising from the forest floor to nowhere. Multiple search and rescue workers have spoken of these, claiming they're told never to approach them. No one knows why they're there. Some are stone, others metal. All look disturbingly out of place. If these lands were once sacred, what happens when they're trampled on by unknowing tourists? If boundaries were drawn between this world and another, could we have erased them without realizing what we were letting in? The further we go into the woods, the more it begins to feel like we're not just losing hikers. We're walking into something ancient and awakening it. In September 2013, 38-year-old Geraldine Largay set off on the Appalachian Trail. She was experienced, determined, and in constant contact with her family through texts and scheduled check-ins. But somewhere in the dense forest of Maine, Geraldine vanished without a single trace. Search teams combed the area for weeks. Helicopters scanned the canopy, and hundreds of volunteers joined the mission. Nothing. The trail swallowed her whole. It wasn't until 2 years later that a contractor stumbled upon her remains, just 2 miles from the trail. With her body was a journal that revealed a horrifying truth. She had survived for at least 26 days in the woods, waiting, hoping, slowly realizing no one was coming. The place she was found had been searched multiple times. So why was she missed? Theories range from human error to something more unsettling. An unseen force that diverts attention, leads people in circles, or hides them from view. Her final journal entries were desperate, pleading, and oddly calm, as if she'd come to accept a fate she couldn't escape. Her case raises haunting questions. If she was so close to the path, how did every trained eye miss her? Was it simply misfortune? Or is the forest a master illusionist, capable of hiding people in plain sight? For every found hiker, there are others who remain missing indefinitely, caught in an invisible maze of isolation. The Largay case leaves us staring into that maze, wondering just how many more stories lie hidden behind the trees, waiting silently to be told, or never to be discovered at all. Our national parks, Those breathtaking, untamed, majestic slices of earth have another side. One cloaked not in mist or shadow, but in silence. As you walk among ancient trees, stare into deep canyons, or rest beside mirrored lakes, you may never suspect what lies beyond your line of sight. One wrong step, one unknown trail on a curious glance in the wrong direction, and you might become a name whispered on forums, a face on a missing person flyer, a mystery that never finds resolution. The hikers we've explored, Kenny Veach, Chris Fowler, Geraldine Largay, aren't just stories. They're warnings. There are patterns, details too eerie to dismiss, phones that stop working, GPS signals that vanish, searches that circle back again and again without answers. These are not isolated cases. From Yosemite to Shoshone, Olympic to the Smokies, the list of unexplained disappearances keeps growing. You'd think the deeper we go with tech, drones, and AI, the more we'd solve. But it's almost as if the parks adapt. Each vanishing comes with its own logic-defying twist. And yet, most people walk the trails unaware of the quiet tally rising beneath their feet. So next time you're hiking alone or standing at a scenic overlook, remember, some paths don't lead back. And if you found this journey through mysteries as chilling as it was captivating, subscribe to Black Thread Mysteries for more tales that make you question what's real, what's hidden, and what might be waiting just beyond the tree line. Like, comment with the park you'd never hike alone in, and don't forget, the forest keeps its secrets well.